Hello, and welcome to the Westmoreland Museum of American Art's virtual programming. We've partnered this evening with interior designer Tony Allgeier. Tony is going to take us on a journey to rediscover the furniture in the museum's permanent collection in this first installment of For the Love of Furniture. Through function, design, architecture, color theory, fashion, and film, Tony's going to discuss why these pieces are important to the permanent collection and how they have been reinterpreted into today's modern designs. Tony Allgeier earned his BS in interior design and minor in visual communications from La Roche University. Tony brings his unique excitement and extensive experience of over 10 years working in interior design, architecture, construction, furniture design, and fabrication to present us with this incredible program. The format for this evening is a little bit different than what you usually see from our programming. Unfortunately, Tony was unable to join us for a live Q&A this evening. However, him and I did record a Q&A earlier. So stay tuned after the program and catch all the great questions that were presented by the Westmoreland staff. All right, let's get started.
Hello and welcome one and all. My name is Tony Allgeier and I am so ecstatic and grateful to be coming into your homes, onto your computers, and onto your smartphones to be teaming up with the Westmoreland Museum of American Art to be showcasing for your viewing pleasure, For the Love of Furniture. Together, we're going to take a journey every other month, rediscovering the classic furniture showcased at the museum. A little background about myself. I am an interior designer with over 10 years of experience in both the commercial and residential realms of design. I also have about 15 years of experience in sewing, upholstery, and construction of any type of furniture. And overall, I am a huge furniture nerd. I love furniture. I love the ins, outs, ups, downs, lefts, rights, and all the secret things hidden in between. I am also a history enthusiast and find it so important and fascinating to know more about the time period in which a lot of furniture and design was created, and the reasons why it was created as well. Let's grab our masks and start our journey with a trip to the Westmoreland Museum of American Art, where we have the fortune of meeting with Doug Evans and Mona Wiley to take a closer look at our very first piece in the Decorative Arts collection, this spectacular Victorian sofa. While we do know the owner of this sofa, we know little about the 19th century craftsman who created it. Let me first paint a picture of events leading to the Victorian period in which this sofa was created. The early 19th century encompasses some of the most sweeping changes in human affairs since the beginning of our history. Scientific developments, a rapidly growing population, and the growth from the Industrial Revolution created vast improvements to the nature of transportation and communication, primarily due to one major development: the steam engine. The creation of the steam engine catapulted so many new industries, including coal mining, steel mills, railroads, iron ships powered by steam. This led to huge improvements in intercontinental transportation of goods and, most importantly, the development of textile mills. Why was the creation of textile mills so important, you may be wondering? Well, textile mills truly changed the world of design. Engine powered factories required less manual labor, so it was inexpensive to produce goods. These goods could be made at a faster rate and sold at a more affordable price. Profits earned by mills and factories could be used to build more factories, making their owners wealthy and eventually making the countries that turn to industrializations rich and powerful. Under the 64-year reign of Queen Victoria from 1837 to 1901, Britain became a dominating world power with other countries to follow, including the United States. At just 4 foot 11 inches tall, Queen Victoria ruled during one of Britain's greatest eras, serving as the world's largest empire, with 1/4 of the global population owing allegiance to the Queen. Stop the presses. Could you imagine being that famous and that globally known all before the creation of social media? The Kardashians have absolutely nothing on Queen Victoria. The rich and powerful who lived in great houses, chateaus, and palaces had always been surrounded by richly decorated objects, ornate rugs and draperies, all handmade from costly materials by skilled craftsmen. The new middle class, which was created from the developments of the Industrial Revolution, could now afford such things since they were inexpensively produced in quantity. The decorative and ornamental became the dominating theme of all design. These decorative objects were most notably witnessed on May 1st, 1851, during the opening of the Great Exhibition. Located at the Crystal Palace in Hyde Park, London, this gigantic cast iron and plated glass building was a dramatic demonstration of the possibilities of the new industrial materials. With Britain as the supreme host, occupying half of the display space, inside its 92,000 square meters of exhibition space, over 100,000 objects displayed along more than 10 miles. With over 15,000 contributors, all housed in a space created from concept to construction in just 9 months' time, using 2,000 people on the construction site. Bing, 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 bing. I don't know about you, but I am exhausted just thinking about the grandeur and scale of this space. In comparison, it's probably about maybe 17 to 18 football fields. Or if you're not a sports fan like myself, it's probably about anywhere from 18 to 20 Lady Gaga concerts. Hmm, that's a hefty size. This colossal undertaking was an idea dreamt up by Queen Victoria's husband, Prince Albert, to display the wonders of industry and manufacturing from around the modern world. This was definitely a time to show off on an international stage. Although the Great Exhibition was a platform on which countries from around the world could display achievements, Great Britain sought to prove its own superiority. This was the first in a series of World Fair exhibitions of culture and industry. Once inside, the materials exhibited were a smorgasbord of decorative ornamentation and opulence, with each exhibitor seemingly trying to outdo each other in excess. Jacquard looms, kitchen appliances, and steelmaking displays were just some of the new ideas showcased. The world's largest known diamond at the time, the Koh i Noor, meaning Mountain of Light, was even on display. Weighing in at 105.6 carats, it is still part of the British crown jewels today, passed down from sovereign to sovereign. All of this grandeur showcased during the Great Exhibition truly launched the beginning of the Victorian style of design. When the exhibition was closed 6 months later, more than 6 million people had visited. Initially predicting loss, the exhibition made a profit of £186,000. As a style, Victorian has come to mean an aspect of 19th century design in England and America of various types of decorative and even over decorative ornamentation. Many design historians and critics have dismissed Victorian design as representing a low point of quality. One critic called the Victorian era a riot of tastelessness, with excess verging on absurdity. Victorian furniture became the first style to be mass produced in order to fulfill the decorating needs of the newly prosperous middle class. Direct contact between the individual craftsman and the purchaser no longer existed. Furniture pieces were made by multiple persons rather than a single craftsman creating an entire piece, which eventually cheapened the quality of craftsmanship. Furnishings of the Victorian era were much daintier in its construction and ornamentation in comparison to the early 19th century industrial style, which focused a lot more on utility over aesthetics. The gorgeous curves of the sofa on display at the museum showcase the tireless efforts to create shape and forms that were so notable during the time of its creation. We do know that this particular sofa was owned and used by the American Society portraitist Cecilia Beaux. Beaux used this sofa as a prop in her studio located in Green Alley in Maine. The sofa had been used in some of her works, as seen in this painting entitled A Lady in Black. The luxurious mahogany frame entices the eye to investigate all of its subtle complexities. Simply carved, scrolled, and molded crests continue down the side of the sofa over upholstered arms. The carved and scrolled cabriole legs and serpentine front rail with raised beads that also continue down the inside front of the legs. Originally, this sofa was covered in olive green velvet with 3 throw pillows. Since its creation in the 1860s, it has been lovingly restored to its original glory with expert upholstery in deep green mohair, with some much needed and restorative TLC to the mahogany wood frame. This sofa was gifted to the Westmoreland Museum of American Art in 1999 by relatives of Cecilia Beaux. Currently, it sits under a portrait by Cecilia Beaux of her grandmother, who was one of the key people to encourage Cecilia to pursue her passion in the arts. She also raised Cecilia and her sister after her mother passed and her father left them. On closer inspection, we can see that this four-legged sofa spans 83.5 inches in length with no center supporting leg on the front or the back. There is a pretty hefty structural support on the underside of the seat. This verifies the sturdy construction and engineering of this piece to distribute weight evenly when multiple people are seated together. It is also quite petite in scale, with a very low seat height comparative to today's standard dimensions. This sofa was definitely created for the upper class clientele and made for moments of relaxation. Since its creation in the mid 19th century, this piece had been reupholstered locally in New Alexandria in a forest green mohair, which is quite spectacular as well, especially considering that the seat and the back are each made of a single span of fabric with no seams. This is a difficult task to complete, to maintain the structural support of the seat without having the fabric puddle and sag in the middle. The clothing worn during the Victorian time period would have been a large consideration in the overall design of furniture as well. Layer upon layer of corsets, petticoats, bustles, and heavy fabrics influence the curved shapes shown in furniture design, as well as assisted with sitting on and getting up from furniture. With its lower back and seat heights, this sofa was created for a much needed breath of relaxation after a long day of luxury. There are two hidden details on the back side of this sofa, an engraving and a plaque. Unfortunately, we are unable to make out a clear interpretation of the engraving, but the plaque says, owned by Mrs. Jean Adolphe Bow, Cecilia Kent Leavitt, Philadelphia, circa 1849. In modern America, many classic Victorian mansions are met with a slight hesitation of doom and gloom, with a pending threat of uneasiness. Why is this the case, though? These structures and their furniture are so gorgeous and unique in their shapes and designs. The later part of the Victorian era, otherwise known as the Gilded Age in America, followed the bloody American Civil War and was simultaneously an era of rampant income inequality, political corruption, and industrialization that helped create the new wealthy class. The chosen home of the newly rich was the Victorian. These gaudy and unbalanced homes were meant to show off wealth and impose a statement on neighbors nearby. With mismatched combinations of towers and turrets, ornate gingerbread trim, and slope-bloated roofs called the mansard roof, which drew from the French imperial style. Inside these large constructions was a maze of rooms like parlors, drawing rooms, libraries, and observatories. Places that were often kept unoccupied with curtains drawn to keep out sunlight, which could damage the clutter of heavy and expensive furnishings. The late 19th century wealthy Americans wanted to emulate Europe, but after World War I, that changed, as Americans' visions turned towards progress and innovation. Modern architects began to design with clean lines and simplicity as the new hallmark of taste. The Victorian, in comparison, became a symbol of excess, with many describing the architectural style as grotesque. Critics of the time began to associate the Victorian home with death, offensive reminders of the troubling era of the Gilded Age. These homes slowly became an unwelcome presence, and eventually the owners moved on. When the Great Depression swept across the country in the 1930s, a lot of the homes were abandoned and became boarding homes for the working poor. Without the proper care and maintenance, the structures quickly eroded, deepening their association with decay. Charles Addams, a cartoonist working for The New Yorker, introduced the world to the Addams family in the late 1930s. This was a reclusive family of ghouls who are morbidly antisocial and mysteriously wealthy. It wasn't until November 1945 that Addams finally showed us the exterior of the strange home the family occupied. Of course, it was a Victorian. The Addams family was a dark perversion of the ideal American family, and their mansion represented that. It was here that the Victorian became permanently associated with horror. In 1960, when Alfred Hitchcock made his film Psycho, audiences already recognized the mansion as a place of unspoken dread. Hitchcock describes the towering Victorian home on the hill as
a little more sinister looking, less innocent than the motel itself. And in this house, the most dire, horrible events took place. You see, even in daylight, this place still looks a bit sinister.
The Victorian mansion died over 100 years ago, but its persistent presence in Gothic-inspired art and pop culture has made it an iconic symbol of dread, now serving as an immediate symbol to audiences that there's something not quite right about this house and those that occupy it. This Victorian sofa showcased at the Westmoreland Museum of American Art represents not only the craftsperson that created it and the American artist Cecilia Beau who owned it, but a time period so important in the shaping of our history, especially in America. This sofa stands as a symbol of the history of Victorian America and how this design style has been re-examined over the years. Thank you all so much for bringing me into your homes. I had an amazing time going on this journey with you, discovering more about this Victorian sofa. I can't wait until our next trip to the Westmoreland Museum of American Art to discover more about all of the different furniture pieces on our next installment of For the Love of Furniture. I hope you enjoyed it. I had a great time. And if you would like to see this piece of furniture or any of the other pieces showcased at the museum, feel free to log on to their website today and schedule your time slot to hop on down in person and see all that the museum has to offer. Until our next installment of For the Love of Furniture, stay safe, stay sound, stay sane, and have an incredible day. Bye!
Looks like I will be heading out to find my very own Victorian sofa. Anyone knows of any antique shops, let me know. So stick around, the show's not over. As I said earlier, Tony and I did have a brief Q&A where we asked some questions and he got to answer them. So stick around and we'll see what we can come up with. All right. Well, hello, Tony, and thank you for this beautiful program and this Q&A session we're about to do. So, unfortunately, we were not able to do this live night of, so we're kind of pre-recording it. But we asked our staff at the Westmoreland what their questions were for this beautiful program that everybody just got to watch. That was super exciting and just
Thank you.
filled with amazing information.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are tremendously honored that you are working with us.
I'm tremendously honored to be working with you guys. It's always been a dream to work in some capacity for a museum. So you've made one of my dreams come true, which is lovely. So.
This is great. Everyone's happy. You're happy. I'm happy. Museum's happy. Audience is happy.
It's just all around.
It's a happy fest. All right. So let's dive straight into the questions. And our museum staff is wonderful. And they answered my call when I said, hey, I need some questions to ask Tony. And they were like, all right. Here's your question. So we have a lot of questions. Hopefully we can get through them. If not, everybody will just have to tune back in next time.
For sure. In December.
Yes.
So excited.
All right. So we're going to start with, let's start with one of Michael Carsone's questions. So Michael is our studio coordinator at the museum. He wants to know, what inspires you or draws you to furniture, and how did you get involved?
So that is a very good question, because I'm not really sure when or how I started to really love for the love of furniture. For the love of furniture. So I've always been fascinated by furniture and design overall. I love the idea of how things are built, how they're created, what's hidden behind walls, behind fabric, behind anything to really figure out how things go together. I've always especially when it comes to furniture, just all the parts and components of it. And I started doing a lot of sewing in high school, in my senior year of high school, which was lovely. I didn't get into one class that I applied for because I was a man, which is very unfortunate. But thankfully that same semester, or whichever it was, they had their first costume making and design class. It was more of an elective. And that's how I learned how to sew. That's been my only sewing class. I just fell in love with the idea of being able to alter clothes really quickly, working with fabric, taking something that is two-dimensional and making it into three-dimensional. And then from there, it just kind of branched into doing different slip covers or making pillows or things like that. And then eventually some people were like, hey, I have this piece of furniture. Would you like to try and reupholster it? So, and I was doing little bits of smaller seats that, you unscrew on the bottom, pop out the seat, upholster it and screw it back in.
Yeah.
And so whenever I started to do parts of that, I was like, this is fascinating. I kind of want to take it to the next level. So it's just been growing over the years, and I've never really had formal training of doing it other than just diving in and taking things apart and putting them back together again. So
that's fantastic. I feel like that's really great advice. Just dive in, take it apart, and then put it back together.
Oh, right. And the biggest thing too, whenever it comes to upholstery, the nicest part about me is the fact that I'm one person and I don't have overhead. Whenever you're actually going to reupholster from a reupholstery company, a lot of times it can be very expensive. So my biggest first off question when people are like, hey, I have a huge sectional sofa. You want to reupholster it? My question to them is, how much do you love that piece of furniture? Because it is very time consuming to strip the fabric off, make a new pattern, and then fully reupholster. It's very time consuming and it's very difficult too. So it's very expensive.
Absolutely.
So whenever it comes to upholstery, just keep that in mind. It's a good tip to know.
Excellent. All right. Our next question comes from Patrick Bocci, our school programs manager. Were sofas like this generally used by people of the house, or were they just decorative pieces?
So it was kind of a little of both. So because there were so many different rooms and spaces and there was so much different hierarchy, and you wanted to show off your opulence and in this grandeur. So it's basically a space to have people over so that people can use them, but they're also used in different ways back then comparative to today. So everybody was very proper, very regal. You had to dress a certain way. You had to sit a certain way, act a certain way. So even though a lot of pieces such as this one were on display in homes, a lot of times they weren't used so often. Like it wasn't an everyday type of thing, but they were still used, which is the purpose of furniture at the end of the day. It's to be sat on or anything like that. So they definitely were used, but used properly.
Right. Okay. All right. I'm curious as to how folks from that time period would react to the way we use furniture now.
I think they would be appalled at not just the way we use furniture, the way that we live our everyday lives and work and all of that. I think most of them would not find us acceptable.
It'd be a lot of fainting couches.
It would be a lot of fainting couches.
All right. Next question comes from Janie Wenzel, our assistant collections manager. And this one pertains to the plaque. The plaque on the back is interesting and seems odd. Is that something that was common on furniture in the past? Does that mean that this couch was made specifically for her? And maybe she picked the fabric to match her studio. So there's like a 3-part question here. So we'll start with the first one. And
the plaque.
Yes, the plaque. Was that common on furniture?
My So my guess
Mhm.
is no, and especially too, if you look at the plaque, I should have commented on this in the video. So the plaque is gold. The screws are kind of
More
jankily
modern?
screwed in there because they're kind of hanging out a little bit. I think screwed in at weird angles, and the screws are silver.
Mhm.
So just for that aspect, I can kind of, and the fact that on the leg there is that imprint from whoever did create it, that would have been their like stamp of approval. It's done. This was manufactured. That plaque, more I would guarantee, is afterthought,
Okay.
and just added afterwards as kind of a remembrance of this sofa was part of what Cecilia Beau used and all of that. So
Fantastic. All right. So then maybe do you think she picked the fabric to match her studio?
that's possible. Because especially if she could afford that piece of furniture, and from how more high society she was, and how well known she was during her time, which is that's a huge accomplishment for a female artist of the mid 18th century to be well known and have money and be met with a certain height of standards. Like, that's really impressive for her. So it's very possible that she did pick the fabric.
It is a really nice fabric.
It is a really nice fabric. And also too, so originally, from what we know, the fabric was more of a velvet, which velvet and mohair, which is what it is currently, they're similar fabrics, but they have a very different feel. So the original fabric, as you can kind of see in the painting that she created with the sofa in that the woman in black was sitting on, it has a bit more of a sheen, and that's because velvets will kind of give off a little bit more of a glisten to them, as opposed to mohair. Mohair just has a really nice hand to it, like it just feels gorgeous. I love mohair. and
of
mohair
course,
is very expensive too.
because the sofa's in the museum, we can't touch it. So it's
exactly.
just to view.
Don't touch it. Don't touch or sit on the sofa, please. Thank you.
As tempted as you may be, it is no longer for sitting.
Exactly.
All right, next question comes from Maggie Geyer, our manager of communications. Why do you think the seat height of the sofa was made to be so low?
So that is an interesting question. And I did go and take a look at some more ideas of why some of the furniture was so low. So there's some conflicting history with seat height. So first and foremost, it seems as though across the board, people were just shorter back then.
Our people,
yeah. And it's interesting too, because Queen Victoria was 4'11", which at that time, actually, even though that was still a little shorter for that time, but most people were not. They were in the early 5 foot range. So a lot of the furniture being shorter was just because people were smaller. But another thought that some historians believe is also because during that time was when the first coil spring was invented for sofas. So that's actually what's inside of the sofa. And certain manufacturers still use springs. It depends on the piece of furniture, but the spring is so that when you sit down, it compresses, but then when you get up, it springs back. Springs back so that you still have a full seat, and it doesn't ever, it just remains that shape over time, especially for a seat. So they think that the shorter legs and the shorter seat height might have been partially due to the coil spring, because they didn't really know. They knew how to manufacture the spring and all of those components, but they didn't fully get the configuration of the height yet, right? Since the coil spring was just so new. But for the most part, it's mainly because people were shorter. So
Okay, all right, fantastic. When we were looking at the sofa, excuse me, and we brought it down from the platform, I was
wearing gloves.
incredibly, yes, absolutely wearing gloves. Thank you. But I was really impressed with how short it was. It was really low to the ground. So that was
yeah.
it was really neat to see. So
it's really impressive when we did take it off of the stand, how much shorter it seems just from that like foot off of the ground. It's crazy to like, because when we were just kind of circling around it, based off of my height anyways, like it kind of only came up to, you know, my rib cage for the back height, that's a petite sofa. And when it's up on a pedestal, it surprisingly doesn't, you can't get that full idea of how tiny it actually is.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
it makes it even daintier too, which is lovely.
It is lovely. A little disclaimer, we did have somebody that is officially permitted to handle the objects with us at the time. So it wasn't just two random people touching and handling it. Okay, so the next question, again from Patrick, were sofas statement pieces or status symbols? So kind of like how we use the newest iPhone today, and things like that.
Basically both. So pretty much even the Victorian home is a status symbol. It's supposed to disrupt the skyline for neighbors. It's supposed to say, hey, I'm rich and I'm richer than you. That's like the whole premise of the Victorian era is new wealth, new money, new designs, all of these ideas, and just building large. And a lot of the Victorian homes in general were just this hodgepodge of, you know, towers and interesting roofs, and just there's a lot to look at. So whenever you go into the interiors, and there's just even more to look at, and just it's overstimulating a lot of times. So the furniture itself is it's meant to again showcase that wealth and showcase how hard you've worked for all of your things, and to just really show off. So even though they are meant to function, it's also functional, you know, extra. It's just extra in everything. So
okay.
Yeah.
So follow-up question to that is from Joan McGarry, former director of education. Do you think the Victorian excess and clutter and abundance of frequently unused parlors was a way to fill some of the type of void, particularly for wealthy and middle-class women? So this excess parlors with all the different sofas in them,
Mm-hmm.
was that a way to fill a void?
Wonder what void exactly, like fill a
Well,
void
in particular, so we're looking at the bulk of women's socializing being governed by strict rules.
Yes. So yes, I would say so. And then again, it's that same idea of if you invite others to your house, you're trying to showcase how you. It's a way of showcasing your status, your wealth. Same with fashion. It's all relative.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to architecture and design and fashion and colors and fabrics that you use, both again on interiors, on drapery, on upholstery, on yourself, and how you adorn yourself, and how your adorned self looks inside of your adorned space. It's all very relative, and it's all meant to showcase where you are and your status and your wealth, and also your taste. So the taste of the time and the aesthetic of the time was excess and just more is more, and more is amazing. And the more you have, the better off you are.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I guess, does the minimalist movement comes after that, huh? We
Yeah,
go opposite spectrum with that, huh?
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, which is very fascinating. It's so interesting for anyone out there who is not a history buff. Honest to God, I am not either. Like in grade school, history was my worst subject. It didn't click with me. I didn't get it. I was much more in the arts and also math for some reason. But when you actually really put all of these things together, it makes so much more sense, especially when it comes to fashion and design and architecture. But because of the Great Depression, and then basically most of the wealthy who had got wealthy really quick lost a ton of money, and then you couldn't have excess. So excess was this idea of you're better than me, but nobody is, because nobody has money anymore. So then it just went into minimalism, was this idea of this is the way you should live. You don't need all of this stuff to be, to have a certain status. And then things just, it's fascinating how it went from like Industrial Revolution to, which was very minimal, to all of this wealth and new ideas and new constructions and new building ways of building, and the steam engine and all of that sort of stuff to create so much excess, to then go to the Great Depression, which destroys all that excess, to then going into like the modern and minimalist type of ideas. It's fascinating how it kind of just undulates like that.
Yeah.
So.
That, I'm curious to see where it goes next.
Right. Oh, especially during this time.
Absolutely.
It's a tricky time. So we're kind of going through a new time period. So what is our next wave of the way that we work with interiors, the way that we design our own spaces, and where will this time period lead us in the future? Also, same with fashion too. Where is fashion going to go from this crazy time?
Yeah.
Where is it going to venture to? So it's really interesting. It's crazy how everything is very relative to one another. And when you single one thing out, in my mind, it doesn't always translate. But when you kind of put all of these different things together and all of the different elements, it just makes sense to me anyways. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yes. All right, Maggie gives us a really great question. How would you incorporate a Victorian piece in a more modern home?
So I personally, first and foremost, when it comes to design, and especially designs of your own interior, there is no right or wrong answer. Okay. I love to say that because it's the truth. There's no right, there's no wrong. I think aesthetics and functionality should go together. If you have a space that just looks pretty, but it doesn't function, you kind of have lost the mark. If you have a place that functions, but aesthetically just doesn't look all that pretty and inviting or interesting, it's still not wrong, but you have to kind of give and take. So for me personally, I love very like modern things in modern designs, clean lines, but I love traditional ideas as well. So you can pair a really unique, ornate Victorian sofa piece, and then put like modern colors with it, have it upholstered in modern fabric, modern patterns. You can take something that is very old and make it your own, or you could take something that is, exactly the way that you found it, and with other ideas of, wall covering, other furniture around it, you can really incorporate anything with anything. So I have a very like hodgepodgey type of idea of design. but it all works relative to one another. So my suggestion, if there's ever a piece of furniture that you love but you don't think it works in your space, don't even worry, because you can make it work in your space. So
that's great. So everybody's going to be like scrambling to go find a Victorian sofa.
I hope so.
All right. So this is going to be our final question. And this is my question.
Ooh.
What made you gravitate towards the sofa first? Out of all the pieces in our collection, that was the first one you chose.
That's a good question. I think most likely because of the fact that there was something about it that just spoke to me. Even before I started to kind of go into the research of it, I have been very interested in like British history, especially with like the monarchy. I kind of blame the crown a little bit because I love the crown, which then kind of led me into watching a lot more historical videos and researching more history on the British royalty. And because I am also a drag queen, it's fascinating really kind of breaking down the word of a queen or a king and what that actually meant through history. So for me, it's a little personal as well, but the sofa for me, I just love its curves and just the overall design of it. I thought it was so nice, and I could tell that it was in a mohair even before I read anything, and so I was very excited about that. I don't know. There's something about that sofa that I just really wanted to. It really stands alone throughout all of the rest of the furniture that you have there because it is a little bit more ornate in its. I mean, most of the furniture that you have is very ornate, but a lot of it is not as upholstered, and there isn't as much fabric. There's a lot more wood pieces.
Right.
So that's why it stands out so nicely. And then when I started to go in and research it, I was like, this was the best choice to start off because this is exactly where my mind is right now. I don't know. I think that couch spoke to me, or maybe Cecilia Bow like mentally reached out to me and was like, you should probably start with me and research more about me because I'm amazing. So
you heard it here first.
Right.
Cecilia Bow, the ghost of Cecilia Bow.
She is crazy amazing. And I took art history in high school and did a lot of design history in college. And it's surprising that I hadn't really heard her name before because she knew of Mary Cassatt and other female painters of the time. And so I was like, how did I not know about her? Because her works are incredible.
Yep.
And I mean, we saw her grandmother is hanging above, which is amazing. But looking at a ton of her other paintings too, it's impressive. Her work is just very extensive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Well, the sofa was a great first choice. It was wonderful. And it's definitely, it draws you in the minute you see it. You're like, I really want to sit on that.
Right, but don't.
Yes, please don't. All right. Well, thank you so much for doing this and taking the time to sit with us and create all of this amazing history and to talk about such tremendous pieces in our collection. And I really look forward to just continuing this on and see what you come up with next.
I can't wait. And thank you to everybody who watched tonight. I'm sorry I couldn't be there live tonight, but I will be there live in December for our second edition, which is very excited.
Yes, please stay tuned. Please come back.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening, for watching For the Love of Furniture with us, and sticking around for the Q&A. I hope you enjoyed those questions and Tony's just really super informative answers. I also want to thank Tony for the incredible program, and I'm really looking forward to the next one. So stick around till December. I also wanted to thank our members and museum staff for all of your help, specifically Maggie, who is behind the scenes running everything, and Doug Evans, Director of Collections and Exhibition Management, for his time and expert insight into the permanent collection. And a big thank you to everyone that joined us this evening. Check the museum's website at westmoreland.org for upcoming virtual programs in the future. Thank you and have an excellent evening. Good night.